Good afternoon. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Public Health, Environment, Civil Rights, and Engagement Committee for Monday, March 26, 2018. My name is Philippe Cunningham. I am the council member for the 4th Ward in North Minneapolis, and I am the chair of this committee. With me at the dais are council members Cano, Schrader, and we also have Cam Gordon. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Today on our consent agenda, we have 4 items. The first item is appointments to the Minneapolis Advisory Committee on People with Disabilities. We have a handful of appointments, and I wanted to actually just take a quick moment because we need to make sure that we are appreciating the folks who are taking time to be advisors to the council and to the mayor. So we have confirming the following mayoral appointments for 2-year terms is Ethan Plesh and Kayla Nance, and also mayoral reappointments of Kenneth Rogers, Amanda Temple, Phil Burke, and Evan Henspeter. And then I just wanted to take a quick moment. Ken Rogers is the current chair. Ken has a comprehensive and technical knowledge of ADA law, accessibility, best practices, disability awareness, and advocacy. Mandy Temple is a longtime member and a vocal disabilities advocate. Mandy is involved with her neighborhood organization and other city boards and commissions. She strives to educate people about disability causes and issues. Evan Henspeter is instrumental in advocating for designing inclusive programs and policies, especially with recreational-based programming with the parks. And Phil Burke he brings operational perspective of implementing accessibility practices. His work with the Metropolitan Airports Commission has been to create accessible experience for travelers. Ethan Plesh is vocal on user experience, especially on things like the City of Minneapolis website. And Kayla's experience with the ARC of Greater Twin Cities Disability Policy Advocate work and her direct care staff makes her a great asset to this. So thank you all for creating that space to be able to acknowledge the folks who are taking time to advise us. The second item on the consent agenda is a grant from the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization for summer interns. We are accepting a grant from the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization in the amount of $19,200 to hire interns to assist in erosion control enforcement for the year 2018. The third item is reappointment of the Civil Rights Director, setting a public hearing for April 16, 2018 to consider the reappointment by the Executive Committee of Velma Corbel to the appointed position of Director of Civil Rights for a 2-year term. And number 4 is the Tobacco 21 Ordinance, setting a public hearing for May 14, 2018 to consider the subject matter of an ordinance, Title 13, Chapter 281 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances relating to licenses and business regulations, tobacco dealers, amending provision to increase the minimum age of sale or provision of tobacco products from 18 to 21. Do any committee members have any questions on these consent items? Seeing no questions, I move approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor, please motion or signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. That item is approved. So we have some really great discussion items today that we're going to be going over. The first that we're going to be having is our first discussion item is receiving and filing a presentation regarding energy and climate programming in 2018 from the utility franchise fee increase. Luke Hollenkamp, City Coordinator's Office of Sustainability, will be giving a presentation along with Patrick Hallen and Mike Kazinka. And I will be turning it over to Mr. Hollenkamp. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. Council members, a pleasure to be here today. As Chair Cunningham mentioned, I'm joined with Matt Kazinka, who is the EVAC co-chair. That's the Energy Vision Advisory Committee co-chair. And he'll be joining me for a few slides of the presentation. And then also Patrick Hanlon of Environmental Programs at the Health Department join us here, and he'll be able to answer any questions you may have on green cost share programs. So we wanted to give you an update on the 2018 programming, energy and climate programming that's resulting from the increase in the utility franchise fee, which was passed in last December. So what made this programming possible is two items. The first item is that the franchise fee on Xcel Energy and Centerpoint Energy bills, electricity and natural gas bills, was increased by ordinance in December of last year, or rather was adopted in December of last year. This increase of 0.5 percentage points will be levied against all customer classes, and it is effective in early 2018, approximately now on residents and businesses' electricity and natural gas bills.
I apologize to interrupt. I want to just acknowledge that Councilmember Jenkins has joined us here on the dais. Thank you.
Thank you. The additional revenue that's expected from the franchise fee increase is $2.2 million in 2018, and that will increase to $2.8 million in 2019. The difference in those 2 years is simply because in 2018, not a full calendar year worth of franchise fee increase will have been in effect. The second item pertaining to this is that when the city budget was adopted last year, the 2018 budget, a ongoing general fund appropriation of $989,000 was made for projects in 2018 to be allocated through the Clean Energy Partnership process. And specifically, that's what we're going to talk about here today is the programs that are resulting from that $989,000. There's been really extensive and I think amazing engagement with our community, specifically the Clean Energy Partnership and the Energy Advisory Committee for really over a year. This really started back in early 2017 when the Energy Vision Advisory Committee formed a funding work group. And this funding work group started meeting with Clean Energy Partnership staff from both the city as well as the utilities to identify programs that would help accelerate as well as increase energy efficiency and renewable energy in the city, as well as then revenue sources potentially to fund those programs. Then in December of last year, city staff and aides began really exploring what these new and enhanced programs could look like. In December of last year, we now had the ordinance changed to increase the franchise fee, and we had that budget allotment of $988,000. So we were able to flesh out even more what those new and enhanced climate energy programs could be. And we started by mapping those programs to the specific recommendations received from EVAC in their report in 2017. Then in 2018, we had the chance to really begin the in-depth engagement with EVAC. We convened their funding work group meeting, which also included participation from the utilities on 2 separate occasions for feedback and discussion. And those meetings lasted on the order of a couple hours each. These were very in-depth meetings that we had with them. We also then had smaller group meetings on very specific program items where we were able to dive into specific issues and really create the minutia of particular programs. And then we also did additional outreach to our CEAC group, that's the Community Environmental Advisory Commission of the city, on both January 3rd and March 7th, reporting to them on the progress of this, as well as then taking some of their questions and feedback at that time. And then in February of this year, we discussed the staff proposals and then the recommended EVAC recommendations and revisions at the EVAC's Q1 meeting on February 12th. And just a few weeks back, we had the Q1 Clean Energy Partnership Board meeting, where we, again, gave final feedback, received final feedback, and discussed with the board the energy and climate programming recommendations. And I want to talk with you a little bit about what those specific programs are now that we will begin to implement in 2018. First off is we'll be engaging with community-based organizations, contracting with them through a competitive process for outreach that's going to be based on the community engagement pilot projects that the Clean Energy Partnership had already done over the last year. The intent of these pilot projects that were co-funded with the utilities was to look at the barriers that residents had to participating in many of the existing energy efficiency programs across the city. So we're going to take those recommendations from those pilot programs and go on to essentially phase 2, which is to focus on the green zones of implementing those recommendations with these community-based organizations who are seen as trusted partners in community and already know a lot of the avenues and vehicles in community for reaching residents. Also, we'll be offering $0, essentially free home energy squad enhanced visits to residents in the green zones. regardless of income. And we'll also be offering no cost or low cost home energy squad visits for other residents within the city that are below the area median income. And these home energy squad visits, many people are aware of them, but they're a really important tool that helps do some on-site energy efficiency project implementation. Also, then they point out areas that a home could schedule follow-up work or follow-up visits for more intensive energy efficiency work. And also paired with that would be 0% interest loans for insulation and air sealing. The city would use some of this funding to buy down the interest rate for loans for residential customers interested in wall insulation, roof insulation, and air sealing of gaps around the envelope. And these three items I've just discussed are worth maybe spending a little bit extra time on. At the Environmental Justice Study session that some of you attended last week, there was a question from a resident that was in attendance about what can the city do to promote or encourage more wall insulation. We actually know that upwards of 1/4 of residential homes in Minneapolis do not have wall insulation. That's really a staggering number, and that represents an enormous possibility for reducing energy use, reducing residential energy bills to make it more affordable housing, as well as then reducing our climate impact. So these first three items here really can tackle something such as wall insulation. We're able to use organizations to reach residents where they are so that they're aware of all the programs that can help assist them. We're then able to pay down or provide for free home energy squad visits, which can go into the home and actually tell a resident whether they have wall insulation or not. And then finally, for those residents that don't have wall insulation, we provide a means to decrease the cost of that work through the 0% interest loans. So what we're trying to do is create an ecosystem of services here that systematically breaks down the barriers that many of our residential customers and residential property owners have in implementing this work.
If I can actually jump in with a question here. So you just mentioned the 0% interest loans, and you might go into this a little bit more, but what will the qualifications be for folks to be able to access that? Like, what will that look like, and who are these loans for?
Sure. So these loans currently would be for residential customers, homeowners that have the ability to make changes to their homes. This is actually built on a pilot project that we implemented in 2018, in 2017 previously. And what we did is we worked with Center for Energy and Environment, who provides loans to many customers for these services to buy down the cost of those. And the reason we worked with Center for Energy and Environment is they're also the sole provider of the Home Energy Squad services that go into the homes and are able to assess whether or not a home has insulation. So we currently envision this program to focus on any residential customers, but I think that as we go through the year and we create more specific marketing, we're going to specifically market again to green zones. We're going to specifically market to low-income customers. And one of the things that this year will provide is it'll provide us an idea of how far this money goes. So in future years, what we might find is that we need to narrow the requirement or narrow the qualification criteria for customers so we can hit the most needy customers on that.
And will there be preference points for folks who live in the green zones at that point for this product?
That's certainly something we consider. We haven't gotten to that point in the programming yet, but I think that is something we're trying to do with all these programs, is to provide preference and priority for green zones, whether it's increased engagement and outreach in those, or literally if it's a competitive process, to provide preferential treatment to green zone residential customers or business customers as well.
Thank you so much.
Sure. The next item on here is that we'll be participating or sponsoring a feasibility and market study for an on-bill inclusive financing program in Minneapolis. Through this allotment of $25,000, we're actually going to be able to leverage some foundational support to undertake this study. And this is really a valuable way for customers to be able to access, again, lending resources and in the inclusive definition that we are using for this particular program too. We are using inclusive in a way that means that a customer would not be denied the ability to receive a loan based upon their credit worthiness or their income, so that it's inclusive in that all customers, all homeowners that could make those changes to their home would be eligible for that. And then we'll be setting aside money for the Green Cost Share program, specifically for housing. And there's a few different programs that we can leverage here, including an existing utility program, the Multifamily Building Efficiency Program. And we also can leverage our city's own lead and healthy homes work. And the Green Cost Share program is turning into kind of an ecosystem of programs on its own and has seen enormous demand for those services. And any follow-up questions, I know Patrick Hanlon's going to be more than happy to provide some more details. And you'll hear more about the Green Cost Share program as we go through this presentation. Also in 2018, we actually already have, or rather the health department already has some dollars allocated to it in the budget for policy development and thinking through some of the technical steps for a multifamily energy benchmarking program. So from the $989,000 I'm discussing today, there's no need for additional money towards that program, but when that policy is developed and implemented, it would require additional resources, staffing in both in the health department as well as in the Division of Sustainability in the city coordinator's office. And then finally, a specific bucket for, again, Green Cost Share program in housing, but for the naturally occurring affordable housing 4D pilot program that many council members as well as the mayor's office have been involved in. This would be providing additional priority for some resources to any building owners that opt into that program so that we can also layer in an energy efficiency component into that affordability work. And then on the commercial programs, again, a substantial amount will be going to the Green Cost Share program, specifically in businesses. Again, we would like to target, and we are providing preference to programs that are in the green zones, or rather customers and commercial building owners that are in the green zones, as well as those that are participating in a new small business program, a refrigeration program that Excel is implementing that is meant to reduce the energy use and cost for small businesses such as grocery stores and local small corner convenience shops. We also then are thinking of an innovative new twist, a new offering from the BTAP program. This is the Business Technical Assistance Program through CPED. This will be funding local business districts and councils to participate in what is being called the Minneapolis Small Business Energy Initiative. This is similar to the outreach we did on the residential side, where we've seen some barriers for customers of the utilities understanding that there are programs available for them. This would help commercial customers and industrial customers learn about a lot of the program offerings that are available, as well as the city's other business technical assistance programs. But this is the first time we'd be providing an energy education, energy specific element to this. Also potentially in 2019, but not for 2018, would be increasing the outreach to commercial energy benchmarked buildings. These are the large buildings, the large energy consumers in the city. And we see that there's a role for providing increased engagement with those customers since they are such a substantial part of our greenhouse gas emissions portfolio. And they provide enormous opportunity for meeting our city's climate goals. And then finally, we've identified $25,000 for workforce development assessment for renewable energy and energy efficiency sectors. We're looking forward to this new discussion on how we can bring workforce development into some of the clean energy partnership work, as well as much else of the city's work. And in fact, we'll be having a meeting with EVAC's workforce development work group this Friday to start talking about potential scoping of this work. So these are the residential, commercial, industrial programs. We're trying to hit as many customers as we can with great resources and gaps that we've identified that aren't currently being met. And the programming that you see in front of you, again, was a result of a long process. And that process included getting some recommendations and some revisions with the Energy Vision Advisory Committee. And I want to turn over to Matt to give you a quick rundown of some of those tweaks that they helped to make to these programs and how they're looking forward beyond the year 2018.
Chair Cunningham, council members, thank you so much. Again, my name is Matt Kazinka. I am one of the co-chairs of the Energy Vision Advisory Committee, or EVAC, and I was asked just to give some background to some of the recommendations that EVAC made during this process of developing this proposed budget, and to give you a sense of how our feedback was incorporated into the final product you see today. So one simple recommendation that we made was, you'll notice in the budget in the residential section that there was a shared budget between the home energy squad visits and the 0% interest financing. Those are originally two separate items, but because they are both administrated by the same administrator, Center for Energy and Environment, and because they're both different tactics that work in tandem with each other, we wanted to offer some flexibility for how those dollars should be deployed. We didn't know which tactics should necessarily be prioritized over the other. So we recommended that those be combined into one budget to offer some flexibility of as we get into the year, seeing which program is being more useful and having a bigger impact, and allowing the city and CE to approach that as they see fit. So that was taken into place. One program you won't see on your list in the commercial section is we had recommended the removal of one item. This was a subsidization of business energy audits. So programs like Excel's Turnkey program or Centerpoint's natural gas analysis program. We recommended that not be funded for this year, primarily because there are free programs paid for by the utilities that go slightly less in depth, but are still a really good access point. These are programs like the Energy Smart program or Center for Energy and Environment's One-Stop Shop program. Thank you. So we wanted to focus outreach and engagement on businesses this year on the no-cost entry points, using those services that are already provided for by Excel and Centerpoint. Possibly in the future, we'll decide that it makes sense to increase subsidization of those paid programs. And then finally, the recommendation for the workforce development assessment for renewable energy and energy efficiency sectors. This was originally not on the list. We recommended that it be included. We see just a huge opportunity as the city starts to invest more in energy efficiency and clean energy programming in the city. That is going to mean a lot more work happening and a lot more jobs being created. And we want to make sure that that all the institutions involved are being thoughtful about how the new jobs created through that investment can be accessed equitably and help address some of the equity issues that the city wants to tackle. So we recommended that assessment be put in place to start exploring what is the role that the city can have. Overall, we're very satisfied with the process, and we're excited to see this budget get implemented and start to see some of these programs start to roll out this year. There are two other recommendations that I wanted you to be aware of. One is EVAC wrote a letter to the Clean Energy Partnership board members who are from the city of Minneapolis. So that includes Councilmember Gordon and Councilmember Schrader. And in that, we advocated that the future budget's amount correlate to the amount of revenue that is coming in through the franchise fee increase. So Luke explained kind of the amount of revenue we expect to bring in is about $2.8 million per year. And we want to recommend that the budget spent on programs like the ones we've explained today that add new and expanded approaches to energy efficiency and clean energy in the city. We would like to see the budget invested in those programs be equal to the amount of revenue coming in from the franchise fee increase. Again, that $2.8 million target amount. So that's a recommendation for this budget cycle in 2019 and ongoing. And then finally, we also, EVAC in our last quarterly meeting, we recommended that the Clean Energy Partnership Board, the folks from the city, from Excel Energy and Centerpoint Energy, have a discussion about how utilities at the table, Excel and Centerpoint, can participate in kind of co-funding these activities or matching some of the investment coming from this franchise fee revenue, whether that is through direct financial investments or redesigning how some of their programs work so that they can they can take advantage of these investments that we are making.
I have a question from Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's more of a comment. Just I want to thank you so much for your work as well as the committee. These are fantastic recommendations. On your second point, just wanted to let you know that Councilmember Gordon and myself very much pushed on that to hold the utilities accountable and also to let everyone at the dais know that this reflects what we have done, what we as a city have prioritized. This does not reflect any new money from the utilities, and that's something that we're in further discussion about. If this is a partnership, we would hope that we would see more of a commitment from our other partners. Thank you.
With that, I'll turn it over to Luke. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And I'll also follow up one of Matt's comments regarding increasing that pot of money from $989,000 to $2.8 million or something in that ballpark. In the first 3 months of this year, the Green Business Cost Share Program, which is funded through some of the programs we're talking about this year, but is funded at a smaller amount, has actually seen applications for their solar rebate in excess of $1 million now. So we're definitely seeing an enormous need for these services, both from us as well as then contributions we can get from the utilities to further this work as well. And I'd like to end the presentation by talking a little bit about next steps. We are now going to begin commencing all of these programs and taking into account some of the feedback such as Chair Cunningham provided on prioritization for green zones for all of the programs there. So we're going to be fine-tuning the programs and getting them out to the residents and businesses of the community. We'll also be in the coming months bringing to City Council any necessary contracts for any of this work, as well as any interdepartmental transfer of funds for some of these programs. We have many partners across the departments in the city, so we'll be working with them to both fine-tune the programs and then also provide those necessary funds. And then finally, as Councilmember Schrader pointed out, Excellent Energy and Centerpoint Energy will be reporting back at the next Clean Energy Partnership Board meeting regarding program alignment that they have with this funding, as well as any additional funding that they can provide for the programs that we're going to be implementing as well. And with that, that's the completion of our presentation. I know Matt, Patrick, and myself are happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you. I don't have any questions necessarily, but I did want to make a few comments. And just to clarify on the budget process, there's been a bit of discussion about this year's budget and how much of the franchise fee went towards new programs and future budgets, and the hope that there'll be more that will go there. I think that the intention was that originally that when we increased the franchise fee, more of it would go into new programs, so people would see a reduced energy bill. And I want to thank everybody involved in this. I think you kind of took the framework we provided. There was a very loose framework when we passed it, saying it should be shared among commercial, residential, and industrial, and everybody should see some benefits. And I really appreciate the work that you did there. I think what happened in this year's budget is the mayor saw the previous mayor saw the franchise fee as an opportunity to pay for some existing programs and staff. And so a lot of that $2.8 million went to support the sustainability office, went to support the green business program and assistance. And I think there'll be some desire, obviously there is already, that we heard about today, is how can we return maybe some of that funding back to the general fund. So the green business cost share, I would suggest, was a bit of a new step because it created ongoing funding through this source. So just because I know there are 3 council members who didn't go through the budget process with Councilmember Connell and I last year, I thought I'd give you that background. I also just wanted to highlight inclusive financing that came up here as one of the things that we're going to spend money studying. This actually was identified by the Clean Energy Partnership as one of our top priorities, was to move forward with inclusive financing. It's an interesting term for a rather complicated thing. Maybe it's not that complicated, but it's a little bit like on-bill financing, but it's different because it's open to anybody who pays a utility bill, including a renter, and it's tied to the meter, not tied to you. So it's an opportunity that's been tried in some southern states and out on the East Coast, where essentially some funder comes up with funding to support some energy improvements, efficiency, or renewable energy. The person at the property seeing those benefits sees their bill go down, and then they pay a little bit more than what it would go down, so they have a savings on their bill, but then they're paying a little bit extra So on the bill, they're paying back the debt for the money that went into making those improvements. It's interesting because then when the renter leaves, it stays on the meter and on the bill. And this is a real opportunity where we could see people being able to take advantage of energy improvements who can't right now. Because right now, the way the borrowing happens or the way the funding happens is it's debt that you take on as a property owner, and you need credit rating and you need to qualify. And that it's so interesting and innovative that I'm working right now on having a study session, bringing in some experts from out of town with my office and the sustainability office. So maybe we can have a study session on it, or short of that, maybe get something to the committee, or maybe committee of the whole. I'm not quite sure how we're going to work that in. But I think it would be great for us to get a primer even before the study happens. So look forward to that.
Could you share more information about the Green Business Cost Share Program? Because I know that that's been pretty successful, so I'd like to hear more about that.
Sure, Chair Cunningham, council members, my name is Patrick Hanlon. I'm the Director of Environmental Programs for the Health Department. The Green Business Cost Share Program, some of the results that Luke was talking about, it's, I guess, I can start back in general, it's providing incentives for businesses and now in housing, in working with our multifamily housing and also with our Lead and Healthy Homes program, is providing additional incentive to drive change faster for greener, cleaner improvements in energy efficiency. Luke mentioned solar. This year, from the start of the year until now, we've received 34 applications for solar projects. In 2016, the last year that we had data, we had around a little over 2 million kilowatts of solar production. With these applications that we've received just in these last 3 months, we'll have around 7 million kilowatt hours of production from these solars once we get those installed. And so I think that's a good example of how we can utilize these funds to be a catalyst to drive change much faster. We'd be more than tripling our solar production from that previous number. And we'd be leveraging those dollars from, he mentioned a little over $1 million. We'd be leveraging $14 million in investment. And we want to drive those changes more deeply in the green zone areas. Those are areas that have been historically underinvested in and intentionally underinvested in. And so driving these programs in those green zone areas first. And we're also showing success with that. We have a number of these projects are in the green zones. So those are the highest priority projects that come in. Those will be funded first.
Thank you. Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, on the green zones, or excuse me, on the green business cost share, I mean, small businesses and other industry, they'll be paying a higher franchise fee. And I just wanted to point out that this is a great example of, having this go right back into the industry where we're helping really push a much more green kind of policy.
Great. Chair Cunningham, Councilmember Schrader, that's absolutely correct. And I also want to point out that when we say business, we also mean nonprofits, community organizations, churches. We have churches, mosques that have applied, so that includes those sectors as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Do any of the other committee members have any questions? All right, seeing no questions, thank you all so much for your time and your energy on this work. I move to receive and file the presentation. All those in favor, please, of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that item is received and filed and approved. The sixth item we have today, our discussion item, is receiving and filing the annual report on sick and safe time and minimum wage ordinance. Brian Walsh, Labor Standards Enforcement Division of the Civil Rights Department, will be giving us the presentation. Mr. Walsh.
Chair Cunningham, members of the committee, my name is Brian Walsh. I work in the Labor Standards Enforcement Division of the Minneapolis Department of Civil Rights. I welcome your questions. Certainly, I will stand for questions at the end, questions and comments. Also, please feel free to jump in and ask any clarifying questions that you have as we move through this report focused on implementation and enforcement of the sick and safe time ordinance, but it also encompasses a bit of the minimum wage enforcement as well as those investigations overlap. Today, I will give you just a very, very brief background on what this is and why we're here today. Then I will focus on the work of the last year, which can really be divided into two broad buckets of outreach and education, and then the enforcement and investigations of the Sick and Safe Time ordinance, and just now starting minimum wage as well. To review, or for the first time for some of our folks tuning in, the workplace regulations ordinances are the Sick and Safe Time ordinance and the municipal minimum wage. They took effect respectively July 1st, 2017 for the Sick and Safe Time ordinance, and then just January 1st, 2018 for the municipal minimum wage. Those ordinances create enforcement mechanisms and assign responsibility of enforcement to the Department of Civil Rights. They also create a requirement to report annually to this committee, which is why I, from the Department of Civil Rights, am standing before you here today. Very briefly, what is the Sick and Safe Time ordinance and the municipal minimum wage? The Sick and Safe Time ordinance creates a minimum standard of paid sick leave in most cases, or unpaid sick leave for very small businesses, that must be provided by all employers across the entire city of Minneapolis. That's the basic idea. Then, of course, minimum wage. You see on the PowerPoint, there are dates and amounts at which the minimum wage will be rising all the way through $15 and then accounting for inflation. I'm sorry, $15 and then accounting for inflation thereafter. Going back 1 year and before, the first order of business for the Labor Standards Enforcement Division really was to take the ordinances that had been passed and figure out exactly what they mean for the almost infinite variety of employers and employees of different industry sizes, et cetera, across the city, and the really great variety of circumstances in which these issues come up. So to do that, in close collaboration with the City Attorney's Office, we created over 100 frequently asked questions that really dive into the details of what these ordinances mean and how they will be interpreted by the Department of Civil Rights. Created 2 websites to publish those frequently asked questions, in addition to other tools such as checklists, posters, etc. And the creation of the procedural rules and the enforcement mechanism itself that the department would and is now using to enforce these ordinances. After creating all of that content and information, there's been a ton of work over the past year and ongoing in getting this information out to the residents and employers across the city of Minneapolis. We do that really in 2 different ways. The first way is that we invite employers and employees to come to us. The main way that they can do that is to contact us by email or by telephone, or certainly by walking in and asking us questions directly. We have been very busy, as you can see in the graphic, dealing with almost 1,000 individual employees and employers over the last year, providing what are essentially free consultations regarding these ordinances. We also then, the second way that we have been publicizing and getting this information into the hands of people that can use it is going out into community. You can see in the slide here, there's a map of outreach events that we have either attended or held. We've been in the media, made radio appearances in several languages, done canvassing, literally door to door on some of our busiest commercial corridors, and also conducted trainings and presentations to almost any business association or neighborhood group that will have us. The only way that or the best way that I know to measure our progress in getting this information out to people across the city is in traffic coming into the websites that we built. Every time I go or one of my colleagues goes out to give a presentation, we encourage folks to visit the websites, to look through the really extensive amount of information that we have up on the websites. I'm happy to say that to date we've had over 40,000 unique users to those websites combined. So I think that that's an indication that we're working really hard on getting this information out. I'll now shift and move over into the actual enforcement of these ordinances. Again, mainly the sick and safe time ordinance, because that ordinance has been in effect since July 1st. At the outset here of explaining our investigations, I will note that during the first year of sick and safe time enforcement, first violations, except in cases of retaliation, do not and cannot, under the language in the ordinance, cannot result in fines, monetary penalties. So that really has influenced both the way that we have gone about our investigations, but certainly also the outcomes. The vast majority are settlements that include warnings. We have received a total of 126 complaints to date. This slide shows you the types of complaints that we are receiving. I would point out the two bars all the way to the left. And this, so what these percentages are the percent of the 126 total complaints, what percent of those had this particular type of issue in it. And in the notice poster and the accrual, about roughly half the complaints were employees saying to us, we don't have any sick and safe time whatsoever. There's no poster up. We don't have accrual. We don't have anything. These are oftentimes in industries that previously didn't provide this type of benefit, oftentimes to their part-time workers. The other types of complaints listed here are typically for folks that already had access to some type of paid sick leave, but there was some issue as to barriers of access or the types of things that they could use their sick time for, etc. To give you a snapshot of our current investigations, we have 34 open sick and safe time investigations and 10 open minimum wage investigations. Just in the last couple of weeks, we're seeing minimum wage start to really come in for the first time. As you can see, 10 cases actively. So that's picking up and increasing, I would say. This slide gives you a snapshot of the industries that we're hearing from folks in. Certainly no surprise that restaurants and hospitality are making up a big portion of the complaints that we're receiving from employees. There's a very large low-wage workforce across the restaurant and hospitality industry, many of whom did not previously receive any paid sick leave. So there's a very concerted effort and a lot of attention paid both to employers and employees in that industry. This slide shows you all of our closed investigations to date. I would point out in the bottom half of the slide that by far, as I mentioned a few slides back, the vast majority of cases are resulting in settlements that include, during this initial year, warnings. At the close of an investigation that results in settlement or in some cases in order, we are not gone, we do not disappear. We then monitor the employers and the employees' adherence to the settlement agreement or the order. So this slide shows the number of active cases that we are, or active settlements or orders that we are currently monitoring.
If I can jump in, I have a question from
Please.
Councilmember Gordon.
And maybe you're going to answer this, but I'm not sure. I'm just curious about what the settlement actually means. And is that a settlement that city staff that you enter into with the employer and you come to an agreement with them that now the matter's closed before there's any fines or fees? Or does the complainant, if there is one, and does the employee participate in that?
So the department is the entity, and the director of the Department of Civil Rights, we are the entity negotiating on behalf of all employees at a particular workforce, negotiating the terms of settlement. But certainly we are negotiating for, in most cases, terms that will, or in some cases, monetary award that will go to particular employees. So to answer your question, I think the employees themselves are not involved in the actual negotiation back and forth about the terms of the settlement, but the department is negotiating on their behalf.
Okay, so is a violation a misdemeanor, or if somebody doesn't, so does the settlement, so I just want to understand if a crime's been committed, who actually decides whether to dismiss or not, or are we pressing charges, or?
Yeah, this violation of a sick and safe time ordinance or the minimum wage ordinance is not a crime. This is not under the criminal code. So enforcement is empowered in the director of the Department of Civil Rights, really to conduct company-wide investigations into an employer's compliance. And then the Department of Civil Rights really stands in the shoes of employees and determines, A, whether or not a violation has occurred, and if so, then the ordinance empowers the director of the Department of Civil Rights to order a variety of monetary remedies or fines. So and that piece is what gives us leverage to negotiate a settlement that under which the employer will actually pay the monetary damages or whatever the case may be.
And so when we call it a violation and not a settlement, I mean, there are some that went to, looks like it's a violation. Does that mean it wasn't a settlement?
Yes. So great question. What we want in most cases is settlement, because we want to get everybody on board and moving in the same direction. We want the employer to actually agree to give this money or make the policy changes that it should. So what we want, the goal is settlement, because that means that we're all on the same page. We're going to fix the problem. The city is not going to have to go to district court and force a judge to order it to comply. But in some cases, employers are resistant and are not amenable to settlement. So in those cases, the Department of Civil Rights will issue an order ordering the employer to comply, and in some cases then ordering the award of monetary penalties or fees. So that has occurred in several cases where we have ordered an employer was not interested in negotiating a settlement, so the department then moved ahead and went ahead and ordered the employer to take certain actions. And to date, that got the attention of the employer such that they did then take the actions ordered of them.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm just going to play this out. So then it looks like those 5 then paid when they were ordered to. But if they didn't pay when they were ordered to, what's our next step?
So our next step, in a case where the Department of Civil Rights finds a violation, attempts to reach a settlement but can't, then orders the employer to come into compliance. If an employer were to completely ignore the department at that stage, we would look both to business licensing if the business is licensed by the city to take some action in regards to its license, or we would refer, and this is all laid out in the ordinance, but it's a great question. We would refer the matter to the city attorney's office to consider enforcing the department's order in a district court.
Okay, but we haven't gotten to that point yet.
We have not gotten to that point yet, and based on discussions with other jurisdictions who have extensive experience enforcing these types of ordinances, it is a very, very rare case that an employer wants to test the city attorney's resolve.
Thank you.
And I have a question as well. I was curious about how undocumented workers fit into these ordinances. So are these protections accessible, and what kind of protections are there in place in order to help prevent retaliation based on that information?
Chair Cunningham, members of the committee, thank you very much for the question. These and all employment rights apply to all employees regardless of immigration status. Any undocumented workers have the exact same right to sick and safe time and to a minimum wage that a legally documented employee does. They're all employees. The Department of Civil Rights takes that point extremely seriously. We do not, we make that point very explicit when in community and talking to folks, but also do not ask for or about immigration status. And the question that Councilmember Gordon asked earlier about who's negotiating is actually related to your question, Chair Cunningham, about retaliation, because it was very intentional on the part of the department to build the investigations such that we are stepping in. Essentially, the director is stepping into the shoes of employees and conducting a company-wide or an employer-wide investigation, and that is to protect as much as we can the anonymity of a reporter. We know absolutely that these ordinances were in large part created for our most vulnerable workers. And we also know that our most vulnerable workers are almost by definition less likely to come forward and blow the whistle if they have to enter in and be a named party to essentially a little mini litigation down here in City Hall with the Department of Civil Rights. That creates an enormous barrier to access. And so we were very, very, very intentional in the way that we're building company-wide, where when myself or one of my colleagues is contacting an employer, it has no employee's name on the front, on the cover letter, in our notice of investigation. This is the department coming in essentially to conduct what you could sort of think of as almost an audit of sorts.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. In closing, looking forward, on July 1st, 2018, that's a big date for the minimum wage because it will affect all businesses across the city, both large and small. I would also like to note something that we're excited about in the Department of Civil Rights is a new collaboration we hope to begin very soon, and we've started discussing this with the health department, and they have agreed to have their inspectors, because they have so many more inspectors than we do, to be on the lookout and during their routine inspections look for labor standards posters and relay that both our information to employers and then a lack of a poster, relaying that information back to the Department of Civil Rights. We are currently negotiating the terms of memorandum of agreement with both the Departments of Labor at the federal level and the state of Minnesota to share information across departments that conduct very similar investigations. We are building a Tableau portal to make all of this enforcement data available to you and the public on a real-time basis. And lastly, I want to note the work of the Minneapolis Workplace Advisory Committee is a range of stakeholders representing employer and employee interests. The Department of Civil Rights staffs that committee, and their collaboration, small business, large business, organized labor, and employee stakeholders, their collaboration has been really key, and I know that they look forward to presenting on their role in all of this to the members of this committee sometime soon. With that, I will stand for questions if you have anything additional.
Thank you so much. Do any of my colleagues have any questions? Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one comment. Well, first of all, thank you for all this amazing work. I really appreciate getting updated on how this has been evolving within the city as the ordinance takes place and kicks in. I just wanted to mention, and you might know this already, but I believe NCR still has a Spanish language program on radio.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that NCR, along with the city's communications department, developed this essentially an opportunity for the city to go on Spanish language radio pretty regularly. I think it was once a week. So I would just say, check in with those folks if ongoing outreach and updates is something that you're thinking about, because that program's already kind of there and it's resourced and it's kind of ready to go.
Chair Cunningham, Councilmember Cano, thank you very much for putting in that plug. I've been on that program 4 times,
Awesome.
and with a 5th scheduled. And whoever was responsible for that, it is absolutely phenomenal. And to the extent we can do that with other radio stations and with other communities, the reach there has made an enormous impact.
That's so great. I'm so glad to hear that you were a part of that. It was a program designed by Mariano Espinosa, who's the neighborhood and community relations specialist there. And I've heard that since the inception of the program, our 311 calls in Spanish have skyrocketed. I mean, we're talking about like more than tripled and quadrupled. I mean, we're getting so many more Spanish speakers calling in. So I'm glad to hear that, and good work. Keep it up.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Walsh, for all your hard work. Seeing no further questions, I move to receive and file this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Those
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that item is received and filed. Thank you very much. And our last discussion item, number 7, is receiving and filing an overview of the Minneapolis Commission on Civil Rights, including its membership, operational details, and functions. We have Miriam Mokri, Chair of the Commission on Civil Rights, who will be giving us the presentation. Oh, we actually have someone who's going to be teeing up here. Danielle, if you please will do so. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Cunningham, Council Committee members. My name is Danielle Shelton-Volchak. I am the Director of the Complaint Investigations Division for the Minneapolis Civil Rights Commission, or Civil Rights Department. And the Complaint Investigations Division is the liaison to the Minneapolis Commission on Civil Rights, or MCCR. I'm here to introduce Miriam Mokri. She's the chair of the commission. Commissioner Mokri has been the chair going on 3 years, and she'll be discussing today the purpose of the commission, its previous work, challenges, and plans for the upcoming year.
Good afternoon, Chair Cunningham and committee. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Miriam Mokri, and I am the chair of the Commission on Civil Rights here in Minneapolis. And I just wanted to give you a brief overview about who we are and what we do. So, we are an adjudicative and advisory body. We are governed by the Minneapolis Civil Rights Ordinance as well as the city charter, and we're here for the purpose of promoting and monitoring the civil rights of the citizens of Minneapolis. Per the ordinance, it dictates our structure. We're a 21-member body with 6 to 8 of those being attorney members. And currently, we have 19 appointments, 4 of those are attorney members currently, and we have 2 vacancies. We have an executive board that consists of a chair, vice chair, treasurer, and secretary. And we have 4 committees this year: the Public Relations and Education Committee, Standards and Procedures, which are both in our internal operating procedures, Engagement and Research, which is a new committee that we have formed, and Contract Compliance, which was a pre-existing committee. Our mission is dictated by the Minneapolis City Charter 141.40. I won't go through all of the points here, but essentially we're here to advise city bodies, the mayor, and the public about what civil rights they do have here, and to advise on the ordinance and any changes, and also to fulfill our adjudicative role, which is, I'll talk more about later. These are some accomplishments that we had in 2017. Through our committee work, we drafted changes to the ordinance language to conform our commission attendance policy with the other commissions. We drafted language also granting our commission the subpoena power, which goes towards our unique position of being adjudicators as well as advisors. We started an outreach program for the Contract Compliance Target Market Program, where we identified female and minority-owned businesses and provided them with information about how to enroll in the Target Market Program. In the last 2 years, we've had 12 contested case reviews. We also developed a proposed infographic to provide ease with which people can file complaints with the city or bring things to our attention, things that we could help adjudicate. We developed social media for the commission to make us more accessible to the public as part of our outreach. And we also, as part of that outreach, created a Civil Rights in the City radio show on KFAI, which airs about once every 2 months. So we did a facilitated brainstorming session in our February meeting, and we came up with some ideas with this new commission that we have now. And essentially our goals for 2018 are to have the ongoing themes of listening, learning, and engaging with the community, developing policy recommendations for the City Council, and educating and outreach on our commission services that we provide, maintaining a continuity of the existing projects that we have put into place and helping those to continue to grow, optimizing the operations of our commission, and educating Minneapolis youth on the civil rights issues here. So our adjudicative goals for the year are: we want to continue doing our contested case reviews. And we also, there's been that big ordinance change to the Civil Rights Ordinance, and we are now going to be hearing good faith effort appeals. And we will be working on trying to develop the protocol for that. And essentially what that is, if you don't know, is that the Contract Compliance Division will be making sure that different employers that have contracts with the city are abiding by the minority and female standards that we have for employment. And if they aren't, those appeals, they may appeal to us to say that they've made a good faith effort to fulfill those goals, and those appeals to be heard by us. Okay. So our advisory goals are accomplished primarily in the 4 committees that I described. They are our workhorses for the commission. Each committee is tasked with creating the overarching goal for that committee and will be headed by a chair and co-chair or co-chair. So the Public Relations and Education Committee, they are kind of the committee that's tasked with being the public face of our commission, setting up outreach programs for us, monitoring any sort of input we get from the community about what different issues are going on in the area of civil rights, things that we could bring to the attention to City Council and the department. This year, their goal is to help continue to increase the public profile of the commission, coordinate events and opportunities for the commissioners to interact with the community. We already do outreach at Pride, Juneteenth. We did some of the open streets this past summer. We want to continue to expand and grow and walk through the community and let them know that we're there for them. The Standards and Procedures Committee is also in our internal operating rules. All of our attorney members have to be a member of this committee, but not all members have to be attorneys. And so this year, their goal is going to be taking the new ordinance changes and having them and creating our internal operating rules to be paralleled with them so they work together, and also to help develop the protocol for the good faith effort appeals that we will start to hear. Our Engagement and Outreach Committee, that's a new committee, and they are being tasked with identifying a topic of local interest or concern, developing research and study, and advising city officials on that outcome with the goal of creating usable data and findings and policy proposals in a report form that we can then disseminate to city council and public and whoever else would like to see. Our Contract Compliance Committee, they are there to ensure that companies take those affirmative steps to treat people fairly, pay appropriately, as you kind of heard today, that these are things all at issue. Our goal for that this year is to continue the outreach we've been doing through the Target Market Program, try to get more female and minority-owned businesses enrolled in the Target Market Program, and also identify other areas of outreach and education that we can assist with. So challenges and areas for support that we've identified for this year. First is member retention and engagement. I believe that's probably an issue with many commissions, especially ones as large as ours. One great benefit of the recent ordinance change was a change of our rigid quorum standards, which prevented us from doing any work if we fell below a certain actual number as opposed to a majority of members. So we're very optimistic about that change helping us with that. Attorney recruitment, as we could use some more attorneys, and that's a challenge we are facing right now. And the last two kind of coincide: ability of the department to assist in our goals and aligning commission goals with department directives, essentially trying to make sure that we know the department has what they need to work on, and maybe our goals of doing outreach and study can parallel what they're doing so that we can utilize the same resources. But it is a challenge because sometimes what a commission wants to do is not always the same as a department. So with that, with support, we love having open communication with the City Council. We're very happy that we were invited to speak here today. Any assistance with research and idea development, because we are such a broad commission, there's so many more focused commissions that have more focused directives. Ours is so broad that we are always searching for what we should be doing and what we should be looking into and how we should be doing outreach, because that's what we see our goal as being. And then also getting information to us in a way in which it is utilized. Since we have those open meeting rules, a lot of our work has to be done during designated committee times and commission meetings, and just making sure that information that we need to make a decision to do the next step, sometimes getting that in a way, in a timely way that helps us move forward, is a way that we could use more support, and that we're constantly working on with the department. They've been very open and helpful with that. So that's all I had in terms of an overview of who and what we are. Welcome any questions if you have any. Otherwise, that's that.
I have a question if I
Okay.
can jump in here. So with the commission themes for 2018, there was the first thing that was listed was listen, learn, and engage with community. And I was wondering, and you talk about the committees really being where the work is carried out, but I'm curious about if there are individual goals, or if the commission is really looking at geographically engaging with folks. So for example, in the fourth ward, like having somebody who is out, who does door knocking with small businesses in the ward, or, is at certain events to be able to talk about the various, what does their civil rights look like in the case of the lane of the city? I'm just curious about what is the vision for empowering individual members potentially in that way?
Thank you for the question, Chair Cunningham. So that's exactly what we want to try to do, is get our faces in the neighborhoods where we live and being able to talk to people who live in our community and hear what they have to say, and bring that information back to the commission to bring those concerns, and also to bring information to them, which is why we're trying to develop that infographic, something that's easily disseminated and easily read. I know that when we do our outreach, we do talk to a lot of individual people about what their rights are, and everybody's always surprised that they have a right to file a claim with a department where they could get damages. People don't realize that that's a power that this commission has, and it's a big power, and we want to make sure people know it is there for anyone who wants to use it. I hope that answered your question, Chair.
My follow-up that would be to that is that
A common theme is talking about the commission itself. And while it's an entity, it is an entity that is connected to different leaders and bodies and whatnot as an advisory role and externally facing role as well. what kind of partnership is there with the Civil Rights Department in partnership with the commission to be able so that folks know, oh, I can go to the city of Minneapolis to file these sort of complaints. Oh, I didn't even know that the city did that. You know, how is there, what does that relationship look like?
So the department itself does outreach for filing claims, and they have their method of, and that's a question better for them about how they get more of their claims and how those claims come to them. We have also facilitated with an email address that we have just for the commission. People can contact us directly there to file a complaint. But has been our goal, is to try to make sure that the department and us work together so that we are advising people about their rights with us. And any complaints that are filed with them obviously could end up with us for a contested case review and now these new good faith level appeals. So it is an ongoing process, and it is developing as we go, because new commission, new times, and we're still building on the work that we've been doing for outreach.
Yeah, I think that there is some space there, because while the Civil Rights Department does have its own outreach and education piece, I just feel like there's a partnership, because if there are different ways for folks to be able to learn and get connected and to protect their civil rights in the city itself, you know, we have all of these very specific jurisdiction that we're able to help with. I think that it's just, you know, as a council member thinking about my community, it would be really great for there to be that partnership to get that information more streamlined from both angles of the work. So, Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much, and appreciate the work and the report today. I have a couple questions. One of them has to do with the number of contested case reviews. It says there have been 12 reviews in the last 2 years, and I'm just curious, historically, is that low or is that typical? And what kind of discrimination was involved?
I don't have the exact breakdown of that, and I don't want to mislead. Thank you for the question. I don't know the exact breakdown of what kinds of complaints have been coming in. That's something the department has. I know in the last year we had 2 contested case reviews, and in the year prior it was 10. So it has decreased. And that is one reason why we are trying to really outreach and let people know we are there. And that's a fundamental goal of that committee. And also that committee would then have us do it as well, the whole commission.
I appreciate that. I think anecdotally, I think we all hear about cases where people are concerned about discrimination. I'll hear folks talk about housing opportunities and even ownership or rental, but also employment are big areas of concern. So I guess, and I don't know if how many are reviewed is really a good indicator of that. We'd have to look at complaints and other things like that. I appreciate that. My second question was about the number of attorneys. So how many attorney seats are vacant right now, and how many do you need to fill then?
The ordinance indicates that we need to have a minimum of 6. And right now we are at 4 attorneys at this point that are licensed. And so we have 2 open vacancies on the commission, and we've had ideas on how to try to recruit, whether it be through CLEs, directed at the community, the legal community locally, and trying to encourage them to apply if they come for some CLE credits, and other ideas that we've had to try to outreach to specifically the attorney community.
Well, I'll certainly do what I can to spread the word, because I think there are a lot of attorneys around, it seems like. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Schrader.
Just to follow up, you mentioned license, so I'm assuming that it's not just someone with a legal background, but someone that's barred in a state.
I had consulted with the city attorney on this matter. Thank you for the question. And the interpretation that we have is you have to be a licensed attorney somewhere. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be in the state, but if you are residing in Minneapolis and you are a licensed attorney somewhere, you are eligible to be an attorney member.
Great, thank you.
All right, any other follow-up questions? One more thing that I wanted to talk about was the educating Minneapolis youth on civil rights issues. I am really interested in learning more about what the vision is for that.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. One idea we had in our brainstorming was outreach at actual schools and offering our services in terms of being ambassadors for the commission, kind of informing them about what your civil rights are here in Minneapolis, because you don't have to be an adult to file a complaint. So we want to kind of do that outreach. We've seen a lot of youth motivation lately, and we'd like to ride that and bring some of that in.
Great. Youth development is just a huge passion of mine, so I was excited to see that. I think that right now, just like you said, there's a lot of young folks are really energized, and being able to understand what civil rights in action actually looks like, and behind the scenes, and so being able to get that info to them and being intentional about that's really great. Thank you so much. Are there any follow-up questions from my colleagues? All right. Thank you so much. And did you have a follow-up here? Yes, please, Shelton Volchek.
I might be able to answer some questions.
Oh, please. Yes.
For you. Once again, I'm Danielle Shelton Volchek. I'm the director of the Complaint Investigations Division. So I will talk about the contested case hearing. First of all, that is an incorrect description. It's not contested case hearings. Contested case hearings usually come as a result of the department finding probable cause that someone has discriminated, and then an agreement has not been facilitated within a conciliation, and then the whole process, it's almost like a complete new legal process then gets put in front of the commission, and the commission sits in the stead like a judiciary, and they go through the whole process over again. So what we're talking about is the commission had a total of 12 appeals from persons who we've had a finding of no probable cause. That means that the complainant's allegation was not substantiated by the evidence. From our perspective, from the Complaint Investigation Division's perspective, we look at this because we're in a quasi-judicial body to a certain extent. So when we have appeals, we look at that as somewhat of a failure for our department because we want them to be legally sound. And so the less appeals we have, the more legally sound our opinion is. So from a department perspective, we want less appeals because then we have followed the letter of the law, which is always our goal, to the utmost, in that there is no room for appeal. So that is from our perspective. So that's one answer to the question. The other one is regarding the attorneys. The ordinance requires 6 to 8 attorneys on the commission. Currently, there are 5. The definition of attorney in the ordinance is someone who is licensed within the state of Minnesota or elsewhere with an active license. We have 5 attorneys on the commission now, 4 of which are active, 1 of which that has inactive status, which we are working with her on becoming active. That will put us at 5. We also we do a round of commission appointments every single fall. We have, because we have seen the lack of attorneys on the commission, we have decided to do a spring round. We have already contacted the clerk's office about doing a spring round, which will be specific to getting active licensed attorneys on the commission to fill those 2 spots. That's why there's only 2 as opposed to Chair Mokry's indication that there were 4 attorneys and only 3 spots. No, there are 2 open positions, and that would bring us at 6. In reference to Co-Chair Gordon's statement, there are attorneys everywhere, correct? The issue is, quite frankly, getting attorneys because they're so busy usually, and getting them to put in the 10 hours to 15 hours a month that's required for this commission to be an active body. And we have struggled with that because the time commitment is quite frankly difficult for a practicing attorney who may be in a firm, in-house, etc. But we will, like I said, we have already talked to the clerk's office and doing a spring round to try to find at least 2 attorneys who are willing to put in the time.
Councilmember Gordon.
I was probably a little flippant about all the attorneys out there, and I just want to note that typically they probably are expecting to get paid a lot more for their time than they get volunteering here.
Yes, that's true.
Great, thank you so much. Seeing no further questions, I move to receive and file this item. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that item is received and filed. Seeing no further business before this committee, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.